Life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. I'm Emily Clark, a 30-year-old sales rep for Clark Industries, the company my parents built from scratch. I've always taken pride in my work, but my real joy comes from my personal life. I'm married to Michael, a man I fell head over heels for. Our home, a cozy 2-story house on Maple Street, symbolizes our life together. Or at least, it did until today. The sun was setting as I pulled into the driveway, returning from a week-long business trip. All I wanted was a hot shower and to collapse into Michael's arms. But as I approached the front door, my key wouldn't turn in the lock. Puzzled, I jiggled it, thinking it was just stuck. That's when the door flew open. "Emily, what in the world are you doing here?" Judith, my mother-in-law, stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of anger and disgust. "I live here, Judith. Why can't I get in? What's wrong with the lock?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't belong here anymore, you beggar." Judith's voice was harsh, her words slicing through me like a knife. "Judith, what are you talking about?" I was utterly confused. Instead of answering, Judith shoved a crumpled newspaper into my hands and slammed the door in my face. My heart was racing as I unfolded the paper. The headline was like a punch in the gut. "Clark Industries bankrupt, court seizes assets." I couldn't believe what I was reading. This had to be some kind of sick joke. Fumbling with my phone, I dialed Michael. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Michael, please tell me what's going on. Why was I locked out? What's this about the company going bankrupt?" His voice was cold, devoid of the warmth I was so used to. "Stop acting innocent, Emily. You and your family are finished. I don't have time for this." "Michael, please," I pleaded. "You heard me. You're nothing but a beggar now. Don't call me again." The line went dead. I stood there, frozen, the phone still pressed against my ear. Tears blurred my vision as the reality of his words sank in. My husband, the man I loved and trusted, had just turned his back on me. My family's company, the source of our livelihood, was apparently in ruins. And my own home, the place where I had felt safest, was now barred to me. The streetlights flickered on as I stumbled down the driveway, the newspaper clutched in my trembling hands. I needed answers, but more than that, I needed the comfort of my family. The walk to my parents' house was a blur. Each step felt heavier than the last, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. As I reached the familiar front door of my childhood home, I braced myself. I was about to bring a storm into the peaceful lives of my parents, but I had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. With a shaky hand, I rang the bell, the events of the evening replaying over and over in my head like a broken record. The door opened, and there stood my father, Richard Clark, his face lighting up as he saw me. But his smile faded when he saw the tears streaming down my cheeks. "Emily, my dear, what's wrong?" His voice was filled with concern. Through sobs, I handed him the newspaper, the words "bankrupt" and "seized" leaping out from the page. He took the paper, his eyes scanning the headline. A look of disbelief, then anger, crossed his face. "This is nonsense, Emily. Our company is doing well. This has to be some underhanded trick by a competitor. I'll get to the bottom of this." His words were meant to comfort, but the cold rejection from Michael and the hostility from Judith echoed in my mind, drowning out everything else. I had come home, but it felt like I had stepped into a nightmare, one where everything I had known and loved was being ripped away from me. As I sat at the kitchen table, my mother, Anne, made tea, her worried eyes never leaving my face. My father was already on the phone, his voice firm as he spoke to lawyers and contacts. But amidst the chaos, one question loomed large in my mind. How could everything have fallen apart so quickly? The night was long, filled with phone calls and whispered conversations. I was physically home, but my heart was locked out, left to shiver in the cold reality of betrayal and loss. The morning light filtered through the curtains, painting the room in soft hues. But the beauty of dawn did nothing to ease the turmoil in my heart. I hadn't slept a wink, my mind replaying the evening's events like a broken record. The disbelief still clung to me, a persistent fog that refused to lift. My parents were already up, moving around the house with a quiet urgency. The scent of coffee wafted from the kitchen, a small comfort in the midst of chaos. I dragged myself out of bed and headed downstairs, the weight of uncertainty heavy on my shoulders. "Good morning, Emily," my mom greeted me, her voice gentle. "Did you get any sleep?" I managed a weak smile. "Not really. How about you and Dad?" "We've been up, making calls. We're getting to the bottom of this," my dad said, his voice resolute. I poured myself a cup of coffee, the warmth of the mug somewhat soothing. "Thanks, Dad. I just don't understand how things could go so wrong so fast." My phone buzzed on the table, jarring the quiet of the morning. An unknown number flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Hello? Emily Clark?" The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, a woman's voice tinged with an emotion I couldn't place. "Yes, speaking. Who is this?" "You don't know me, but I know a lot about you, and about your husband." I tensed, gripping the phone tighter. "What do you mean?" "I mean that Michael isn't the man you think he is. I have proof." My heart raced. "Proof of what?" "Meet me at the Oakwood Cafe at 11 a.m. I'll show you everything." "Wait, who are you?" But the line went dead. I stared at the phone, a sense of dread settling in my stomach. "Who was that?" my mom asked, concern etched on her face. "I don't know, but she said she has proof about Michael. I need to meet her." My dad frowned. "Emily, this could be a trap. We don't know who this person is." "I have to find out, Dad. If there's something about Michael I don't know, I need to know it." The clock seemed to move at a snail's pace as I waited for the meeting. Every scenario played out in my mind, each more unsettling than the last. As 11 a.m. drew closer, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I needed answers, and this mysterious woman claimed to have them. Oakwood Cafe was bustling with the lunchtime crowd when I arrived. I scanned the room, looking for someone who might be waiting for me. Then I saw her, sitting alone at a corner table. She looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. "Emily Clark?" she asked as I approached. "Yes, and you are?" Rachel Simmons." Her name clicked in my memory. She was Michael's ex-girlfriend, the one he left for me. "What do you want, Rachel?" She looked me straight in the eye. "To show you the truth. Look at these." She slid a few photos across the table. My breath caught as I looked at them. There was Michael, cozying up to a woman I didn't recognize. My heart sank. "That's not all," Rachel said, pulling out her phone. She played a recording. Michael's voice filled the air, cold and calculating. "I don't love her. Never did. It's all about the money. Once I get my hands on it, she's out of the picture." I couldn't listen anymore. The world seemed to spin around me. My husband, the man I trusted, had been using me all along. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because he did the same to me," Rachel said, her voice steady. "And no one deserves to be used like that. Not even you." I stared at the photos and the phone, the reality of Michael's betrayal sinking in. My life, my marriage, it was all a lie, and now I was faced with the truth, cold and unyielding. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I needed to see this. I walked out of the cafe, the images and words replaying in my mind. Michael had played me for a fool, but no more. It was time to confront the lie my life had become. And somehow, amidst the pain and betrayal, a flicker of determination took root. I would get through this, one step at a time. The drive to my parents' house was a blur. The trees and houses whizzed by as my mind raced back in time. It was strange how the present turmoil unearthed memories I thought were long buried. I remembered the day I met Michael like it was yesterday. It was at one of those high society parties my parents often dragged me to. "Emily, you look lovely tonight," my mom had said, adjusting my dress. "Try to mingle, dear. You never know who you might meet." And mingle I did, though reluctantly. That's when I saw him across the room. Michael. He was laughing at something, and I was struck by his charm. We got to talking, and it was like we clicked instantly. He was funny, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. It wasn't long before he asked me out, and I said yes without hesitation. I was swept up in the whirlwind romance. He was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, handsome, and he seemed to adore me. But there were signs. I remember his girlfriend at the time, Rachel. I saw her confront him once. She was crying, accusing him of using me for my family's money. "You only want her for her wealth," Rachel had yelled, tears streaming down her face. I had dismissed it as jealousy. Michael assured me she was just bitter about the breakup. I wanted to believe him, so I did. We got married in a lavish ceremony. It all seemed like a fairy tale. My parents were happy, I was happy, and life was good. Or so I thought. Now, with Rachel's revelation still fresh in my mind, I saw how blind I had been. I had ignored the warning signs, choosing to see only what I wanted. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, I braced myself. The once familiar place now seemed like a refuge from the storm that was my life. My parents were waiting for me, their faces etched with concern. "Emily, what's wrong?" my mom asked as I walked in. "I need to talk to you both. It's about Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We sat in the living room, the place where so many family memories were made. Now it felt like the stage for a confession. "I met with Rachel today, Michael's ex-girlfriend," I began, my heart heavy. My dad's brow furrowed. "What did she want?" "She showed me things, Dad. Photos of Michael with another woman and a recording. He's been using me for my family's money. He never loved me." The words hung in the air, a painful truth I had to face. My mom reached out, taking my hand. "Oh, Emily, I'm so sorry. We never thought he would do something like this." "I should have seen it. There were signs, but I ignored them." My dad's face hardened. "We'll get through this, Emily. We'll figure it out together." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I know. I just can't believe it's come to this." We sat in silence, the weight of betrayal and hurt filling the room. It was a moment of reckoning, a realization that the past was not what it seemed. But in that moment, surrounded by my parents, I also felt a sense of resolve. The journey ahead would be tough, but I wasn't alone. And with each step, I would find my way back to myself, to the life I deserved. A life free from lies and deception. With a heavy heart and a steely resolve, I returned to the house I once called home, my father beside me as a pillar of support. Judith, my mother-in-law, stood there with Michael, my husband. The moment they saw us, contempt painted their faces and the insults began. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Emily, especially after your family's company tanked," Judith sneered, her voice dripping with false pity. Michael joined in, his words sharp as knives. "Yeah, what are you now, Emily? A beggar at our doorstep?" I felt a pang of hurt, but I steeled myself. This was the same man who had pursued me relentlessly, who had broken up with his girlfriend to be with me, the man who had promised to love and cherish me. And here he was, showing his true colors, just like his mother, who had always been sweet as honey when I showered them with gifts. But my father, ever the calm in the storm, spoke up. "Actually, the company is doing very well. The news about bankruptcy is nothing but a false rumor." The change in Judith and Michael's demeanor was almost instant. Their scornful expressions melted into ones of surprise and, dare I say, fear. But I had had enough of their games. "Michael, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. He tried to maintain his composure, but I could see the nervous flicker in his eyes. "I know about the affair, Michael. I've seen the photos. I've heard the recording of you admitting that you never loved me, that you were with me only for the money." I held up the evidence for him to see. The color drained from his face, and for a moment, he was speechless. Judith tried to step in, her voice laced with fake concern. "Now, Emily, let's not be hasty here." I cut her off. "This is between me and your son, Judith." Turning back to Michael, I continued, "I'm filing for divorce, and I will be seeking compensation for your betrayal." That's when Michael lost whatever composure he had left. "You can't do this to me. I'll claim half the house. It's mine too." But I wasn't the naive woman he thought he had married. "You won't get anything from me, Michael, not after what you've done." Their sneers had vanished, replaced by a dawning realization that their charade was over. I turned and walked out of the house, Dad by my side, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new battle, but I was ready for it. After the confrontation, Dad and I sat in his office. The room was quiet, but my mind was anything but. I was still reeling from everything, trying to process it all. Dad was looking through some papers, his expression serious. I knew he had something on his mind, something important. "Dad," I started, "what are we going to do about Michael's threat? He wants half of everything." Dad looked up from his papers, a small smile playing on his lips. "Emily, do you think I would have let you marry him without some insurance?" I was puzzled. "Insurance? What do you mean?" He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. "I never fully trusted Michael. Call it a father's intuition, so I made sure to have a safety net." He handed me a stack of papers. As I skimmed through them, I realized what they were. Debt receipts, all under Michael's name, and the total was staggering. "I bought his debts a long time ago, Emily. It equals the value of half the house, maybe even more." I was speechless. My father had foreseen the possibility of betrayal and had prepared accordingly. It was both shocking and oddly comforting. "But why didn't you tell me before?" I asked, a mix of gratitude and surprise in my voice. "I hoped I was wrong about him," Dad replied, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I hoped you'd never need these." I hugged him, feeling a surge of love and appreciation. "Thank you, Dad. You're always looking out for me." He hugged me back. "Always, Emily, always." We talked more about the legalities and the next steps. It was going to be a battle, but with Dad's forethought and the evidence I had, we were on solid ground. As I left his office, I felt a renewed sense of strength. Michael and his family thought they could intimidate and bully me, but they had underestimated my resolve and my father's foresight. I was ready to fight back, and this time, I was not alone. Sitting at the small cafe, I sipped my coffee, watching the world go by. It had been a few months since the divorce was finalized. The court sessions were very dirty. Michael and Judith behaved extremely indecently. They cheated, lied, and accused me of all mortal sins. They themselves wanted to appear before the public as victims of circumstances. However, there was plenty of evidence of their dirty game. Michael got nothing, not even a penny from me. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. My best friend Sarah sat across from me, her eyes full of concern. "You okay, Em?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, just thinking." "About?" I shrugged. "Life, I guess. Everything that happened." Sarah reached out, squeezing my hand. "You're so strong, Em. Not everyone could have handled all that." I chuckled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Didn't have much choice, did I?" "You always have a choice, Em," she said firmly. "You chose to stand up for yourself. That's what matters." Her words were comforting, but I still felt a void inside me. Everything I thought I knew about my life had been turned upside down. The bell over the cafe door jingled, and I turned to see a familiar face. It was Rachel, Michael's ex-girlfriend, the one who had warned me about him. She approached our table, hesitant. "Hi, Emily, can we talk?" I nodded, and she sat down. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything." I studied her face. There was genuine remorse there. "It's not your fault, Rachel. He fooled us both." "I know, but still," she sighed. "I wish I had warned you sooner." Sarah watched the exchange, her brow furrowed. "It's a messed up situation," she commented. We talked for a while, the three of us. Rachel apologized again, and I accepted it. It was time to let go of the past. After Rachel left, Sarah turned to me. "So what now, Em?" I thought about it. The house was sold, the divorce was done, and the company was back on track. "I think it's time for a fresh start," I said, more to myself than to her. "Like what?" "I don't know yet. Maybe travel, see the world a bit, rediscover who I am, away from all this drama." Sarah smiled. "That sounds amazing, Em. You deserve it." I smiled back, feeling a spark of excitement for the first time in months. "Yeah, it does, doesn't it?" We finished our coffee, chatting about potential travel destinations and the adventures that awaited. As we left the cafe, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Walking down the street, I felt the sun on my face and a gentle breeze in my hair. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I was still standing, stronger and wiser. It was time for new beginnings, time to explore and find happiness on my terms. As I walked, I realized that no matter what life threw at me, I had the strength to face it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see what it held. And with that thought, I stepped forward into my new life, ready for whatever came my way.